Whether you rocked Adidas in the 1980s or you're just lacing up your first pair, these sneakers tell a story. And today I'm bridging the old school with the new school, using my collection as a guide. Let's dive into the legacy of Adidas, or Adidas, and see why these kicks, gym shoes, sneakers are relevant. So many memories from the brand Adidas, just watching a lot of these old school cats, early 80s, mid 80s. A lot of the folks that was wearing Adidas, they wasn't the most prominent people in terms of employment. They were street pharmacists, and they did things on the corner, and you put something in their hand, they put something in your hand, and there was a healthy exchange sometimes. By and large, a lot of these guys and gals were wearing the Adidas tracksuits. They was wearing Adidas. They was wearing shell toes, forms, top 10s, and all these different silhouettes, all these different trims of Adidas. And as a young guy growing up in Detroit, these are the guys we idolized. Yeah, people were wearing Nikes and other brands, I'm not saying that, but these were guys and gals that we idolized, and we shouldn't have, because our parents were working in the auto plants and doing other things. But I remember a lot of the drug dealers, they was wearing Adidas. And not only the drug dealers were wearing Adidas, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, the NBA was heavy in Adidas. 70s, the 80s, a lot of your marquee NBA players were wearing Adidas. Let me give you a little history. Your favorite basketball player, and I just did an episode about him, he was wearing Adidas, as you can see in this picture, during the 1984 Olympic trials. So ladies and gentlemen, people were wearing Adidas back in the 80s. Do not get it twisted. I know Adidas may not reign supreme because you got so many brands now. The sneaker marketplace is saturated with different brands that's beyond the Nike, the Converse. The Adidas brand, to me, it almost symbolized excellence in the 1980s. Again, Kango hat, freaking Adidas tracksuit, shell toes, whatever silhouette, whatever trim that you had, or your uncle had, or your big brother had, or your daddy had, or some cases even your grandfather had. Adidas, ask them. Adidas brand back in the 1980s, the 70s, the 80s, and some of the 90s, and even now. But I'm a guy, man. I'm nostalgic. I'm an old school cat. I love old school Adidas. Now that I provided my personal history with Adidas, I'm gonna take you sneaker by sneaker and tell a story and provide some substance to support that story. Now, I cannot talk about my personal collection unless I start with my favorite pair of Adidas. Ladies and gentlemen, the Adidas Form, my favorite Adidas silhouette of all time. This particular version is red patent leather. One of my favorite features of the Adidas Form is that Dillinger web, which is supposed to resemble a basketball net. The original Adidas Forms came out in 1984. I have more on that later, but the Adidas Form is my favorite sneaker of all time. Man, I tell you, I used to cut grass trying to buy some Adidas. I even worked at White Castle back in the early 90s just to get a pair of Adidas Form. Adidas Forms, baby. Next up, Run DMC, my Adidas, the Adidas El Dorados. Now, these were made famous by Run DMC. They used to wear them, and we used to actually call them the Run DMC Adidas. We're talking about mid-1980s, man. Adidas El Dorado. Again, the El Dorados, just like the Forms, got that Dillinger web on it. Old school, baby. I'm gonna have to do a separate episode just for the El Dorados. Another unique piece from my collection is another pair of Adidas Forms. You see the trends, but this one here is the Detroit versions, the 313. These are exclusive to Detroit. Of course, if you live somewhere else, you can buy them, right? Dillinger web, just like the old school. Look at that, man. Adidas Form, patent leather. Next up, another pair of Adidas Forms. This time, these are the snakeskin Adidas Forms. But you notice something different from the other Forms? This one doesn't have the Adidas logo embedded on the ankle bone. But you know what? It got that Dillinger web. Old school Adidas, baby. Snakeskin all around. Looking good. Looking good. All right, next up, we got the Conductors, the Adidas Conductors. But what's unique about these? These are the NYC edition. Now, back in the day, Patrick Ewing actually was signed with Adidas, and he wore the Conductors, he wore the Attitudes, and he wore the Rivalries. But these are the New York City, the NYC versions. These are the colors of the New York Rangers, and they have some other trims as well representing the New York Knicks. But look at that, man. This is old school Adidas too, baby. Guess what? A Dillinger web. NY on the tongue, NY on the heel. The Adidas Conductors. Now, another favorite of mine is the Adidas Centennials, originally released in 1985. Let me orientate you to the back of the Adidas Centennial with this spoiler flex. Looks like a flex muscle. But you know what? The Centennials does not have that Dillinger web. We got the old school bottom. Check out this toe box on the Centennials. Look how it's indented compared to some other ones. The Adidas Centennials, 1985. Oh, another pair of Adidas Forms. Look at that. These are the Adidas Forms 1984 with the distressed shoestrings, Dillinger web, old schools at its best. Suede, velvet material. Look at that, man. Adidas, baby. I think I'm an official Adidas sneakerhead. The Adidas Concords, patent leathers. Now, people call these mids. Back in the day in Detroit, we didn't call them mids. We called these jokers 3/4, right? Look at the patent up here. Old school Concords, baby. It's almost like a cut-off top 10s, if you will, with a strap. This is old school at its best with the old school Adidas badging on that sole. The Adidas Concords, baby. This is 1980s. Now you may ask yourself, DA, do you have any low top Adidas? I do. The Rod Lavers. The Rod Lavers, however you want to pronounce it. Huge 1980s. Adidas badging, look at that super thick sole. The Rod Lavers had thick soles way before these shoe brands nowadays have thick soles. These were worn for tennis. Rod Laver used to be a tennis star back in the day. Old school, baby. Rod Lavers. They had these in blue and also they had them in green as well. Another pair of Forms. These are the 3/4 Forms. Not really a fan of 3/4 Forms. I like the high top versions, but nonetheless, they're in my collection. And here's another red pair of Forms, again, 3/4. The Adidas Top 10. You cannot say the word Detroit in the 1980s. And if you know, you know, without mentioning the top 10s. The classic sneaker, the classic trim, the classic colorway. The Adidas Top 10s, baby. And what's significance about the Adidas Top 10? There were 10 players in the NBA back in 1979, 1980. These represented the top 10 players. But you know what? We Detroiters, man, we took this shoe and ran with it. So do your history on Detroit and Adidas Top 10. Oh, let's talk about the Samoas, another low top sneaker that I have in my Adidas collection. The Samoas was a tennis shoe. Now the Samoas were unique because they had different colorways. As you see, this colorway is just a little different from the norm. Nonetheless, it's a comfortable shoe. The Samoas were huge back in the day, and even around 2000, I want to say 11 or 12, even 13, they made a huge comeback. Oh, we mentioned Patrick Ewing, right? Remember when Patrick Ewing wore Adidas? Remember he wore the Conductors? I already showed those. He wore the Robberies, and also he wore the Attitudes, the Patrick Ewing Adidas Attitudes, right? They re-retro these a few years ago. I bought these in Okinawa, Japan. Yeah, man, Adidas had a strong stranglehold on the industry. And guess what? The Adidas Attitudes had the Dillinger web as well, which was consistent with Adidas sneakers, basketball sneakers in the 1980s. Now, here's a modern day sneaker that I have from Adidas. You can tell by that Boost technology. These are the ZX running shoes. These are mad comfortable. I like them. I don't run in them. I just rock them on a regular. But I have a modern Adidas here. I got a couple other modern Adidas here. Adidas Top 10, but this is a different color. We got the green and white. Still old school, man. Old school Adidas Top 10 tongue. Just like the other ones, just like the other colorways, but these are green. Still like them. I haven't worn them in years, but now I even tip my toe in the skateboarding water. I don't skateboard, but I got these Adidas skateboarding sneakers. These are actually tight, man. Got the Adidas 3 stripes right here. They don't have it on the inside, but they got air holes in here. That's cool. Nice thick sole for your skateboarders. If you just rocking these on a regular, these are Adidas skateboarding shoes. Just, you know, it has a little old school flavor to it. You know what I mean? The last sneaker in my Adidas sneaker collection is the Adidas Top 10. I got a lot of Top 10s and I got a lot of Forms. These are the patent leather variety, right? Same thing, old school tongue. But you notice these have the speed lacing inside of the tongue, inside of the shoe, and traditional lacing right up here. That's Adidas Top 10, just a patent leather version. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This is my Adidas collection. Old school mixed with some of the new, just like I stated in the intro, bridging the old school with the new. That's what I'm here to do. Well, that rhymed a little bit. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the True Originals book written by Martin Kennispell. It's a classic. Stay tuned. This book is like a time capsule, showcasing the original silhouettes that made Adidas a legend. The Adidas Form, the Superstar, the Centennial, the Rivalry. These shoes define different eras. There is no way I could be an Adidas sneakerhead if I didn't purchase the True Originals book written by Marlon Knispel. I will tell you, this book has every pair of old school Adidas from the 1970s all the way to 1993. Let's do a walkthrough with it. From the streets to the courts, from the 1980s to now. Adidas has always been about more than sneakers. It's been about culture, identity, and innovation. Whether you're old school or new school, the three stripes have something for you. What's your favorite Adidas silhouette? Drop it in the comments and let's talk about the stories these sneakers tell. Hey, thank you for tuning in today on this episode of the Nomad Cast, where we talked about my Adidas sneaker history, bridging the old school and the new school. If you enjoyed this content, please continue to like, subscribe, and follow. And tell them about the Nomad Cast podcast show. I am your host, D.A. Until we meet again.